All right, folks, welcome back to Truth to Power podcast, brought to you by New Energy Economy. I am not joined by Mariel Nanasi today. If you all are ready to hear Mariel lay it down, I'm so sorry. You are instead in for a treat. We have a special guest on the show today. I am joined by Chris Dodd. He is an attorney in Albuquerque. He has his own law firm. We are sitting in a gorgeous office overlooking the west side of Albuquerque in the distance, and we are talking about LNG. Now, I can actually almost see from here where they plan to put this thing.
That's right.
You've been dealing really closely with the application. This is from New Mexico Gas Company, which is an America company, and they have proposed to put this enormous facility on Albuquerque's west side, very close to Rio Rancho, very close to Double Eagle Airport, and it's going to be a liquefaction center, freezing, storage. I'm understanding like hundreds of millions of...
Yeah, a million cubic feet, a million cubic feet. They call it a BCF is what they call it.
A BCF.
There's all sorts of different lingo that I've had to learn in doing this case in the gas industry.
Well, thank you for joining me today.
For sure.
And we were hoping just to get all of your knowledge and expertise and understanding about this thing, because a lot of our listeners are really plugged into this issue. So
cool. Well, I'm glad to be here.
I guess we can start at the beginning with this thing.
Sure.
Your involvement. What was the first that you were introduced to this application? Was it through Mariel?
It was through Mariel. She reached out to me and asked if I'd be interested in helping out on the case. And I haven't done a lot of environmental law, but I've worked very closely with John Boyd, who worked with Mariel quite a bit, and still does to this day. And I've always admired Mariel and John and what they've been able to do in New Mexico, especially with the recent Avangrid news and that all getting finally and thankfully getting done with. And so when Mariel asked me to help out with this case, I said, absolutely, no question. And it's been a fun ride. It's also, it's scary too. Like, the facility that the gas company wants to build will hold 1 billion cubic feet of natural gas that's stored in liquid state. And basically what you can think about it as is like just a huge tank. And as you were saying, they want to have what's called liquefaction capability, which is the ability to take vapor natural gas and turn it into liquefied natural gas by supercooling it and purifying it and everything. And then basically what they want to do is they want to use this as storage. What you have to understand in the natural gas industry is natural gas is primarily used, especially in New Mexico, as a fuel for heating. And so what that means is there's not a lot of natural gas use in the summer. And then there's a lot more use in the winter. And what that does is you see a seasonal change in prices. Summertime gas is cheap. Wintertime gas is expensive. Winter storm gas is extremely expensive. And so every single natural gas company in this country uses storage to store gas in the summer and then use it in the winter, because you never know how much gas you're going to need on a particular day in the winter. You have a good idea, but it changes based on the weather, and if temperatures drop, demand spikes, and you've got to have extra gas to sort of put into the system and maintain a good, reliable system. Now, right now, the gas company already has that storage. They've leased storage down in the Permian Basin for 2.7 BCF worth of gas. And they pay, I can't remember the exact number, maybe $6 million a year or something for that. Okay. But then they lease out 1 BCF of that, or about a third of it, for like over $3 million And so the cost actually of this storage in West Texas is very reasonable in terms of what they're getting for it. They don't like that arrangement. And Marielle and I suspect there's a reason they don't like that arrangement. These companies, utility companies, make money off of capital expenditures.
Right. They don't really make money from selling gas.
They don't make money from selling gas. They don't make money from paying other firms to do things for them. All of those kinds of costs, right? The cost of transporting gas over pipelines, the cost of storing gas in West Texas, the cost of buying gas in Texas and northwestern New Mexico. All of those costs are passed on directly to the customer with no, surcharge for the company to make profit, right? The way that these companies make profit is by providing those services, right? Owning those means of storage and transportation. And so when the gas company has their own pipelines that they have built, they get what's called a return on equity.
And that's what it's all about.
And that's what it's all about for them. So they want to drive up their capital expenditures as high as possible. Because if they drive up capital expenditures, they get a fixed percentage of return on that money. Currently, it's somewhere around like 9.5%. I couldn't tell you the exact figure.
Right. In
a new case, they're asking for it to be raised over 10%. So that every year, if they have, say, $500 million in capital expenditures outstanding, they get to make approximately 10% in return on that. So
which is high.
Which is profit for them. Yeah.
It's better than in the investing world. That's a really good
10% rate of return. Everybody will take that.
Which doesn't make a lot of sense because a lot of these companies, like New Mexico Gas, PNM, they have like a monopoly status. And
that's right, and that's how
you have to pay them.
That's right, and that's how utilities in the United States work as regulated monopolies, and it makes some sense. Okay, from an economic standpoint, you don't want to have 5 different gas companies,
right,
with all these different gas lines crisscrossing all over the place. It makes sense to have one distribution network. It actually reduces costs to have just one network, but you have to have, and that's what the PRC is. You have to have strong regulation. You have to have folks like New Energy Economy coming in and holding the utility companies accountable and making sure that they're not, sneaking anything through. Right. And that's what they're trying to do, I think, with this project, is they wanted to, push this thing through because everybody knows, in this landscape, everybody knows electrification is coming. Petroleum-based energy supply is going to be phased out.
Right.
Everybody in this industry knows it. And that poses an existential threat to companies like New Mexico Gas Company, which was recently acquired by Emera. Right? So Emera invested a bunch of money in buying New Mexico Gas Company. And now I think we're like 8 years past that, 6 years past that, something like that. Now they're looking at a landscape where decarbonization is going to happen. And everybody knows it. And what Emera and the gas company want is they want to push that horizon out as far as possible. They want to be able to use natural gas as long as they possibly can. The way they do that is by building out more infrastructure and locking in rate base by spending a lot of capital. Right? And so what we have seen in the documents in this case is that what the gas company is trying to do over the next 4 to 5 years is expand their rate base by something like 60%. It may be almost double, actually. I can't remember exactly on the figures, but it may be trying to double rate base from like 6 or 700 million or up to like 1.2 billion that they get to earn that 10% profit on every year.
It's a good chunk of change.
It's a good chunk of change, right? And Emera wants to get its return on its investment in the gas company. And so, ultimately, the digging into all of the data, all of the arguments by the gas company, what we've, I think, found and revealed in our briefing to the PRC is that this thing doesn't make sense. That the real reason is to increase rate base for the company, not to provide a service to the customers.
Right.
Because the idea in a utility, in a regulated monopoly utility environment, is for the utilities to come forward and say, okay, we want to build this stuff out. We want to build this extra line out so that we can serve these other people or do this. And we need to spend X amount of money, right? And then the PRC is there to balance the needs versus the costs, right? Okay, so we're going to serve this many more people, but it's going to cost this much. Is it in the public interest, right? That's the ultimate question. And in this case, I think that we've demonstrated that it's not in the public interest. It's in the corporate interest.
It is, definitely.
And it doesn't provide much in the way of public interest. So the gas companies made two predominant arguments as to why they, quote unquote, need this facility.
Right.
The first is that they claim it's going to increase reliability of their system. In 2011, there was a large winter storm.
Right. Winter Storm Uri caused some...
No, Uri was later. Uri was in 2021.
Okay.
So we'll talk about Uri in a second. But first, we've got to talk about the 2011 storm, because the 2011 storm produced one of the really bad things in the utility environment that you just don't want to see. And that is customers lost gas service, right? When weather is cold. Mm-hmm. That's not good, because then they lose heating, and,
that could be dangerous.
That can be dangerous. That's right. And so post 2011, and let me tell you this, okay? Natural gas supply in New Mexico comes predominantly from two places: the San Juans in the northwest and the Permian Basin in southeastern New Mexico and Texas. And at the time of the 2011 storm, what happened was the Texas production areas were not well weatherized. And so what happened was you actually had the wells that come out of the ground freezing off, getting clogged up with ice, and I don't know all the science behind it. Basically, they couldn't get any gas out of them.
Right.
And so what you had was you had significant supply side constraints. And then you had pipelines that were having issues as well because of the cold weather. And so the gas company wasn't able to get enough gas, and they ended up curtailing gas service to about 28,000 New Mexicans. After that storm, the Federal Energy Regulation Commission, as well as state regulatory bodies, looked at what had happened and recommended and required changes to the system to make sure it wouldn't happen again. Then we have 2021, Storm Uri. Storm Uri hits. I think listeners will probably remember. If they don't remember the name Storm Uri, they'll remember the images coming out of Texas with icicles, and right. People's houses flooding because the pipes burst, and then all the water was freezing and stuff. Yeah. That was Winter Storm Uri. It was devastating in Texas, caused all sorts of property damage in Texas. And there were problems with gas supply. But the interesting thing in Uri is that what Uri demonstrated was that the changes made post-2011 were effective, because despite significant disruptions in the natural gas markets, there weren't any curtailments of customers. The gas company was able to buy gas. The problem was they had to pay a lot for it. Right. So they ended up having to buy, a lot of gas on the market. And that's generally how they work, right? They will buy lots of gas on the market. They have gas in storage to help supplement. So that if they can't get quite enough on the market, they can pull out of storage, right? during Uri, prices spiked from, you're looking at like maybe $3 per MCF or MMBTU, just units of gas,
Right.
okay? Spiked, like there were prices on the intraday markets that hit as high as $600 per MMBTU or MCF. And so, a 200-fold increase in the cost of gas.
Right.
And so what happened was, the gas costs get passed through to the customers. And so ultimately the customers had to pay $107 million for gas for that storm in New Mexico. That's a lot of money. There's no question that that's a lot of money. In the wake of that, the gas company was asked by the Public Regulation Commission, look at this issue and tell us how we can prevent this from happening again. Because $107 million is a lot of money. And I think the PRC thought, well, if we could spend some money now, could we prevent this from happening in the future, right? The funny thing is, in this case, what we have found is that the answer is pretty much no. You can't prevent this kind of thing from happening, except if you spent enormous sums of money, right? You could store enough gas in the summertime to last all winter, but you're talking about incredible amounts of storage that would cost you just probably, in the order of hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right.
Right.
Because my understanding is that even if they built this facility and there was a winter storm Uri, we would be buying gas on the market.
That's right. We'd still have to buy gas on the market.
We wouldn't actually solve that problem.
This
which is
facility,
the problem that they were asked to solve.
That's right. That's right. They were asked to solve price spike mitigation. Right? How can we make it so that we don't get hit with these extraordinary gas costs? This facility is only going to store 1 BCF of gas. Well, to give you a sense of during Winter Storm Uri, they used multiple BCFs of gas just in that week. So it's not like this facility has enough gas to hold the company over for days and days and days and days. And the other thing is, you can only pull out of the tank about 1/5 of it each day. So you can pull from the tank for 5 days.
Right.
You'll cover some of your gas usage, but then it's empty. And you have no more stored gas. That's a problem. Because right now, they have 2.7 BCF worth of storage down in Keystone, which is the facility in West Texas. This facility would only be 1 BCF. So they're going to have, if they are allowed to do this, they're going to have less stored gas, right? Less cheap summertime gas to use in the winter, which means, there's only one real conclusion there. You're going to end up buying more gas during the winter. It's going to cost more for ratepayers or customers, not less. And the idea that there are reliability problems. So let's go back, right? There are 2 things that the gas company claims this will help. One, reliability. Well, Uri showed us reliability is not an issue. The changes that everybody has made to their gas supply systems have made it so that it's very, very unlikely that the gas company is going to have problems where they can't buy gas. They actually have 4 different gas-producing regions that they buy from now. At the time of the 2011 storm, there were only 2, the San Juans and the Permian Basin. Now they buy from 4. They've contracted with production in Colorado and production in Wyoming to make sure that they can get gas all over the place, right? So that if there's a problem in the Permian, it's unlikely that it's also going to be affecting Colorado and Wyoming at the same time.
Right.
And so all of these changes that were made show, and then the fact that it worked in Uri, it shows that supply itself isn't an issue. Price is the issue, right? And so the commission asked them to look at price spike mitigation. And the gas company claims in their documentation, we could save tons and tons and tons of money with this. Well, when I cross-examined the gas company's expert during the hearing, early in January. This is a gas company expert. Okay, he gets hired by the gas company, paid $1,000 an hour to work on this case. Right. His company he estimated, or he didn't want to guess how much his company had made during this case. He wouldn't tell us how much he'd made, but he said, $500,000 might be a fair estimate. Guy gets paid $1,000 an hour to go all over the country doing this kind of stuff, mm-hmm. right? Helping companies build more infrastructure. Yeah. That's basically what he does for a living. He admitted that the scenarios that the gas company had run, that he had helped them build out for using this facility during a Winter Storm Uri type event, were not real world. The models that they said, oh, see, look, we could save money with this thing. He acknowledged that they weren't real world, that you wouldn't do them in real life.
Right.
And so then I talked to him about, well, let's talk about real world, because the gas company's vice president testified that there were certain targets that they were going to shoot for to enter each month of the heating season with, how much gas they would have in storage, right, for each month. And he said that they would target to enter February, which is the month that both the 2011 storm and the 2021 storm occurred. Okay, so February's historically been a really difficult month in terms of big storms, big impactful winter storms. So he said that they would target to enter February with 650,000 MCF in the tank, and that they'd target to leave February with 200,000 MCF in the tank. Well, what that means is then you got 450,000 MCF to work with during the month of February.
In the middle of the winter.
In the middle of the winter, okay? During Winter Storm Uri, when the gas company incurred $107 million in gas costs, extraordinary gas costs, right? They were able to withdraw nearly 550,000 MCF from their current storage. So 100,000 MCF more than what they would have available from LNG under their own targets. What does that mean? That means that they would have, if they had been using LNG at the time of the 2021 storm, they would have had to go and buy 100,000 MCF more gas on the intraday markets than they did already. And so instead of spending $107 million in extraordinary gas costs, they probably would have been looking at something like 125 or 130 million.
And that's according to their own models, their speculative models.
Kind of. Their own models assume, we could use the full 1 BCF or 1,000, a million MCF to combat Storm Uri. But in reality, you'd never do that. Because one, you're never going to go into February, which is late in the heating season, with a full tank. Because you've been using it to mitigate earlier in the season. And you're never going to use everything that's in the tank.
Right.
Because if you
testified that they would never run it dry.
Never run it dry. Because it would be imprudent to do so.
Right.
Because you never know what's coming, next week. If you get hit by a big storm next week and you've run the tank dry just to try and save money, right? If you have no stored gas whatsoever, that's when you could potentially run into supply issues and have curtailments. And so the last thing they'll ever do is run the tank dry. They can't allow that to happen. And so based on their own, models, right? That's why their models are not real world, because it wouldn't happen. You would never start with a full tank. You would never run it completely empty. And so if you take their model and apply their own targets, right? The 650,000 and the 200,000, that's where you
that's how you end up with this result of hey, you're actually buying more on the intraday market than we did.
That's right. What you're proposing here is a system that is likely to cost gas company customers more in extraordinary gas costs during a big storm, which is the opposite of what the commission wants them to do. The commission said, go find us something that will help us save gas company customers money during these storms. And yet what they've proposed is something that it really looks like there's a good chance it would end up costing us more in a big storm.
Wow. And that would be like, that would be a very real world situation where a couple of years down the line, they have their facility and they got their return on equity and they've got their, rate increase, and then a winter storm hits and ratepayers are paying more already, and then they have to pay more on top of that.
That's right.
Buying more.
That's right. And guess who?
Oh no.
And guess who doesn't care?
Yeah. Oh my God.
The gas company. Why? Because they pass through the gas costs.
Right.
So they don't actually care if it ends up driving up the cost of gas.
Mm-mm.
They don't care.
Well, hopefully the PRC cares.
Hopefully, I think they will. I think they will.
Cares.
I think that it's become pretty clear during this case that this thing's problematic. And that doesn't even, consider the safety implications, right? Of putting this gigantic tank of natural gas out on the west side. Mm-hmm. And we found out during the hearing that that's just like next door to a huge solar installation. That there's, I don't know the details. I don't know exactly what's getting built out there. Mm. But P&M's building an enormous solar facility out there that I guess is going to have big amounts of battery storage.
Right. You don't want to have that near an LNG facility.
Yeah, let's put a bunch of stored energy that can light on fire, right? Batteries next to a bunch of gas that can light on fire.
Right.
And I mean, like, if you have a problem at either one, that's like it compounds on itself, right? Mm. And then you've got tons of schools within, just miles of
the homes of 40,000 people are downwind and downhill.
That's right. That's right.
I went to they had some presentation at a community center in Rio Rancho about it, mm-hmm. the Mexico Gas Company, and kind of looked around at their presentations. And I'm a photographer. I know how that stuff works. And they had all these forced perspective shots of look how far away it is from anything like that. And I was like, you used it. I saw on the bird's eye view. It's
lens
right
tricks.
There.
Yeah.
It's I'm not kidding. You could probably, if they built it, you could see it from where we are.
I'm sure
it would be that close.
No, I know. It's
It'd right over there.
It's, we can see from right here. We can see the Amazon facility out there on the west side. This isn't that far.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's really interesting is, Marielle and I realized that nobody really knows too much about it, but the Rio Grande Rift is basically this area right here where the Rio Grande runs. It's a geologically active area. Mm. There are earthquakes
right
in the Rio Grande Rift. We haven't gotten any big ones, right, that have caused any major issues. There have been little ones here and there. But the research indicates that we should be a lot more concerned about seismic activity.
Yeah, especially since it's a fact that New Mexico's experienced something like 1,500 more earthquakes this year than last year, just because of fracking and
right.
deep well injection and all that stuff.
That's right.
And the science isn't really in on that. All we know is that there's 1,500 more earthquakes in the Permian Basin.
Yep, and so you would think if you're going to build a huge tank of liquefied natural gas, that the gas company would have looked into seismic activity,
right,
and said, okay, we can site it in this location because it has these characteristics and all of that. What we found was not once in the entire application did they talk about seismic risk to this facility. Not once. Mm-hmm. The only time in their whole application that seismic or earthquake or anything like that came up was during it was in the CV of one of their engineers who they had testifying on their behalf, right? So they include his CV. And he got up and he testified, I have no concerns about the siting of this facility. And then I started talking to him about seismic risk. Mm-hmm. And no, it hasn't been looked at yet. No, I'm not surprised there's, wow. It's just too early to look at that. It's wait, but you guys are asking for the PRC to give approval to this thing, and you haven't even looked at seismic activity risk?
Yeah.
So, if they approve it, and then you find out, this is troublesome, you're telling me you're not going to build the thing anyhow and drive up your capital expenditures? I find that hard to believe, right? And that's ultimately, I think, one of the major issues and I think one of the commissioners saw it, which is that the gas company hasn't really explored different sites for this thing. They already have an option on this piece of land that they want to put it on.
Oh, okay.
And I think that has really driven the location and siting of this thing. And it's like, they have pipelines running all over, up to Santa Fe and all that. Why are we going to put an LNG plant right next to Rio Rancho and Albuquerque? Why are we going to do that? Mm-hmm. Of all the places you could put it, there are places you could put it where if something happened, it would be bad from an environmental perspective, it would be bad from a cleanup perspective, but it, wouldn't necessarily be as threatening to a major population center, right? You could put it far out kind of in the desert, mm-hmm. and it would be okay. It's not great. We still don't want it.
Yeah, we still have the same problems with imprudence.
Right, but you at least wouldn't have the possibility
health problem.
Yeah, exactly, and not to mention all of the emissions that come out of these things and all of that. Right, there have been a lot of problems in communities where LNG facilities have been located because they put out a lot of different gases. Right, that you can't keep these things from leaking, and
there are enormous health problems associated with it. I remember I think the first time I saw you, we didn't meet there, but mm-hmm. it was at a public comment at the Bernalillo County Commission when they were trying to pass their resolution to, I think, ask the PRC to turn this down, which passed, your comment was a lot about, hey, this is all about ROE for all these guys, so, and by the way, they're trying to raise that.
Yeah, they want to make more money. Shocker. Companies want to make money.
Because I was going to talk about that stuff, and then you went up there, and I was like, okay, good. And then I ended up talking about something else. But there were a lot of comments at that particular meeting about health and about respiratory issues and emissions. And I think the big argument behind a lot of this stuff is this overall fossil fuel argument, where it's like, hey, they call it natural gas, but it's coming out of drills. It's the same industry, basically, and it's trying to perpetuate itself.
I mean, it used to be a byproduct,
right?
Right now, it's a product, right?
It's the product,
yeah,
and they're trying to turn hydrogen into a product of that product, I guess, because you can turn methane into hydrogen.
Yeah, it's it's interesting. I don't know if you saw, but just last week, on Friday of last week, the Biden administration put a pause on new LNG facilities.
They did.
Huge, because what's been happening is with the geopolitical sort of scene being what it is with Russia. Russia is a huge supplier of energy to Europe.
Yeah. And
with all of the problems with Ukraine and all of that, Europe has had to start shifting away from Russian supplied gas because they're sort of beholden to Russia at that point. Mm-hmm. And so the United States has started stepping up exports of LNG. And so the United States has become one of the largest exporters of LNG in the world. And it's caused a huge expansion in LNG facilities located on the Gulf Coast. And there have been some major health issues associated with those. There have been major disasters like the Freeport
disaster.
Yep. And it's good to see the Biden administration finally, for really the first time ever, saying, whoa, hold on. We're going to put a pause on this, on developing new LNG facilities, because we're concerned about the greenhouse gas implications of methane. Natural gas is methane, right? Methane is a horrible greenhouse gas.
Right.
And every point along the supply chain of natural gas, there's leakage.
Yeah.
You can't avoid it.
Inevitably.
Yeah, you can't avoid it, right? It's like you fill up a balloon with helium, and then after a few days, it doesn't float anymore because the helium's leaked out, right? It's just, that's what happens. And you can't ever contain all of it. And so the Biden administration has said, whoa, stop. We want to look at this. We want to, really dig in on this issue and decide whether we really want to be promoting the use of LNG throughout the world.
Right. And that's to get to that bigger point.
That's right.
At that hearing where people are saying a lot of this, if you invest in this infrastructure, it will become useless within a very short amount. Like within
the goal is to make it useless.
Right.
We don't want this infrastructure.
Right.
And so why are we going to spend, right? The gas company wants to spend $181 million just to build the LNG facility. That doesn't include their ROE. That doesn't include the operating costs. That doesn't include the additional cost of gas. Because you have to understand also, to put gas into this facility, you got to use energy.
Right.
Because you're supercooling a gas down to a liquid.
Right.
And so the costs are enormous. Hundreds of millions of dollars over the next 30 years, right? That's what they're saying. Oh, we'll depreciate it over 30 years. Well,
it's like we have climate projections on the books that are shorter than 30 years.
Yeah, we don't want to be using LNG.
That's crazy.
30 years from now. We don't want that, right? Like, what we really should be investing in is getting the heck away from gas, right? I during these proceedings, I just started scratching my head and thinking, look, New Mexico's not that big of a state, right? Like, we've got, how many households do we have in New Mexico?
Right.
Not people, right? But households. We got maybe 500,000 or 1 million, right? What would $300 million do to electrify 500,000 homes? Right? That's $600 per home.
Right.
That's a decent amount of electrification, right? Could that put a electric water heater in everybody's house?
Yeah.
That would do a lot, right? Just switching all water heating in the state from anything involving gas to electric. That would make a huge dent in reducing our use of fossil fuels.
Yeah, my understanding is a lot of new home construction is already electrified anyway.
Right. That's what people want.
Yeah.
Right? People want electrification. One, you get just one bill, right? Which is nice because it's just simple, right? And two, people want to go green. I don't know if you've noticed, but I've been watching the cars that I see around, all the new cars that I see. And there's lots of electrics now, which is wonderful. But there's also, it's funny, it used to be a thing to make the exhaust pipes real visible. You'd have 4 exhaust pipes in the back and make them flashy and stuff. Now, even the gas burning cars, they're hiding the gas pipes. You can't see the gas pipes because then it's oh, is that an electric car that you've got there?
Right.
Oh, cool. But it's not. It's just a combustion gas. But combustion isn't sexy anymore.
Right.
Combustion is becoming sort of a thing of the past, and people want to move away from it.
That's true. Tailpipes were hot, and now they're out.
That's right. Right.
That is totally true.
So, at the end of the day, we just don't think that this facility makes sense. Not when we're trying to move away from fossil fuels, not when we're trying to change change the entire energy economy, right? I mean, that's new energy economy, right? The idea is, let's get to something new, something that, helps protect this only home that we're ever going to have, right? Despite what Elon Musk wants to do and go into space and stuff,
right? We're still going to have to.
We got to live here, right? So. I hope that the PRC knocks this thing down and says, no, this doesn't make sense, and we're not going to invest this kind of money into infrastructure that hopefully we won't have or we won't need in 15 years, right? That's where we want to go. So, why don't we spend the money where we want to go? Let's not spend the money going down the path that we truly don't want to go down.
Right. No stranded assets.
It's an
expensive stranded asset to have.
It is. Oh, it is. I mean, imagine in 15 years, you're already seeing it. People who have the money are installing solar. People who have the money are installing electric water heaters, heat pump, or mini splits for heating and cooling in their homes. People are moving away from gas and propane and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
People don't want to be on that stuff anymore. And there's another, one of the other things that Marielle and I looked at in this case, which is pretty concerning, is right now the gas company is complaining about their storage. They're saying, oh, well, we always get cuts from this storage facility down in Texas. They're always reducing the amount that we're able to withdraw, and it's a pain to deal with. I'm sure it's a bit of a pain, right? They got to figure out, if they get cut a little bit down there, they've got to figure out, okay, well, how can we make it up over here? And it's a pain to deal with. I get that. But the thing is, they've never had a situation where that facility has just gone completely offline. Mm-hmm. It hasn't happened. There have been days where they get cut pretty heavy. Okay, so they call it force majeure, right? And so the facility down there, if they have an issue, an unforeseeable problem, they can declare what's called force majeure and then cut what people are allowed to draw out of the storage facility. So in the past 10 years, back to 2013, they've had a total of 15 cuts to their supply from this facility due to force majeure. 11 of them occurred in 2015. There was one majorly problematic area in 2015. There haven't been any cuts since 2021 due to force majeure. It's never been the case that they, during some big winter storm or something, can't get any gas out of their storage. Mm-hmm. But with LNG, right, they're very complex systems, LNG, right? You're storing liquid natural gas. You got to turn it into a gas when you want to use it, right? So you got to heat it up and all of that. And heat and gas can be a dangerous combination, right? If something were to happen to the LNG facility, there's no backup. The gas company is proposing that is their only stored gas anywhere on the system. If the LNG facility suffered some kind of catastrophic failure, the gas company would be without any stored gas. And so for this, and this isn't this could possibly happen. This isn't just hypothetical. In 2015 in Plymouth, Washington, there was an LNG facility that had, because of human error, there was an explosion. And it sent shrapnel flying. And one of the pieces of shrapnel hit one of the tanks. There were two tanks at this particular facility. The gas company is proposing just a single tank design. One of the tanks got hit by a piece of shrapnel, and it punctured. This is a 2-layer tank. It punctured the outer layer. Thankfully, it didn't puncture the inner layer, because I don't know what they would have been able to do about the BCF of gas in this tank if that inner layer had also been punctured, and if they hadn't had a secondary tank, right? So what they ended up being able to do was drain a lot of the gas out of that tank that got impacted, and put it into the other tank, right? But that whole facility was offline for 2 years because of that one incident. So one little incident, right, because of human error, right? They failed to purge a pipe of gas completely. And so when they switched it to a different mode, it exploded, and it took the facility offline for 2 years. It cost $50 million to fix. And if that had happened here in New Mexico, if this LNG facility is allowed, and they're without stored gas for 2 years, what are they going to do? Yeah. They didn't have a good answer for that during the hearing. They basically said, oh, well, and this is the funny part, they said, oh, well, we could just go on the market and buy it. And I was like, oh, because there aren't any real reliability problems in the market anymore. It's just price. You're just going to pay a lot of money, but you'll be able to get gas. And they basically agreed. But what that would mean is they would not have any stored gas for up to 2 years, right? That would cost hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right.
And it would make New Mexico so vulnerable to spot market prices, intraday market prices. It just doesn't make sense, right? The current facility is not posing that many problems. And why would we spend $180 million up front to lock us into a system that we hopefully won't need in 15 years?
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
well, those are good points.
Yeah. I mean, so, what else can I tell you from there?
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the show and talk about LNG and the problems with this facility. And I hope you keep kicking butt out there, and we can see a denial of this application.
That's the plan.
That's the goal here.
That is the plan. Hopefully we can win this one, because it'll just be painful to see them if they build this thing, and then, I'm just certain if they were allowed to build it, we're going to see all the problems that we're saying that they're going to have.
Yeah,
I think that's what's going to happen.
I know that there's no, NM Gas Company has no experience building or maintaining a facility like this of their own, because they lease everything out. So I guess what are they going to do? They're going to have to build a facility and then hire several salaries worth of experts to safety and all these people, and then how are they going to train all the local first responders to deal with a giant leak? Because does a fire department in Rio Rancho know what to do if a BCU hits the streets?
No, they have no clue. Right?
I don't think anyone has any idea what they would do about this. Like, it's just super imprudent, and that's the word of the day.
That's right. Yep. It would not make sense.
And net benefit.
Yep. No net public benefit. That's right.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
and
thanks
I
for
appreciate it. And maybe we can talk again sometime.
Sure. I'd like that.